My name is Charlie Dodge, and I used to work for S.D. Warren. I started working for Monsanto, and I got out of college. I was a chemical engineer, and I had spent a summer at Monsanto working there, a summer job. So they took me back, and I worked in the lab there in Springfield, Massachusetts, working on vinyl compounds for cable jacketing, hoses, gasketing, you name it. And actually, my last job there was to try to find design a vinyl copolymer resin that would hold the maximum amount of asbestos in a floor tile. And the fact that I'm still alive is a tribute to I don't know what, but that asbestos came into the lab in a burlap sack, leaking out of the edge corners, and was mixed in a mixer and put on mill rolls and everything. So anyway, I spent all my time either driving to Maine in the summer and the fall, or going to Vermont in the winter skiing on weekends. And actually 33,000 miles a year just on weekends. And I finally decided I can't keep doing this. So I came up to Maine looking for a job, talking to friends I had in Portland. And everybody says, you got to go down and talk to S.D. Warren. So I did, not knowing really what S.D. Warren was or what they made. And in those days, they had a test. I think their main measure of suitability for a new hire was to and I forget the guy's name that ran these. It was one of these things where you check off all the adjectives on a piece of paper that you think apply to you, and then you check it all off as you think other people refer to you, and you check all off as what you think you ought to be or something, I forget it. And if you pass that test, they take you. And so apparently, but I made it. And I quit my job at Monsanto on early September, and got married in the middle of September, and bought a house, moved to Maine, and started working on the 2nd of November, and spent 1959. So I spent 30, what was it, 30, I've forgotten now, 32 years. Yeah, because I retired in 92. And here I am, glad to be here. When I went to work for Monsanto, I worked in their vinyl resin department. So when I got to Warren, and they started, just at that time, they were starting to make release paper. And it was, at that time, a flat paper, and you came off with a flat composite vinyl product that's supposed to look like leather. Naugahyde. Remember Naugahyde? Naugahyde was, a lot of it was made on Warren paper. And I was the only, I think I was the only one in the company that understood what a plastisol was, because I'd been working with vinyl resins. And so, I had a leg up there, and it just happened. And so I stayed with it as technical sales, and then we had a big business exporting, and our markets were worldwide. I traveled, well, not so much. We had a subsidiary or a partner in Scott Graphics International in Belgium, which sold the European market, but we sold all over South America and Asia. I spent a lot of time traveling in China, which is the biggest customer they got right now for release paper. I retired from Warren in '92. Can you believe it? I've been retired for 25 years. I mean, how lucky can you get? I was just hired to go into the research lab and fuss around with various coatings. Well, we're looking at maybe coating paper to make it moisture vapor barrier. And one of the things I remember a project trying to testing various coatings of saran type coatings on paper, testing the moisture vapor transmission through it. That could be used in pipe tobacco pouches or anything. And then we got into release paper. And that was just the beginning. So I'd say they started in the release paper business about 1960, just about when I got there, which was lucky for me. And they went on. It got more and more sophisticated, and our product got more and more sophisticated. And the Ultracast product, which comes up with these super leather-like and other textures, was developed. It was developed right here in Westbrook. And it was a totally new concept of coating paper and curing the coating in place on the paper. And at times it was difficult to get people in the mill to understand that the coatings they were putting down on the paper, they were really running a chemical reaction to get things to set up properly, and you had to be accurate about how much, so we found out one day one of the ingredients they were measuring in a bucket with a broom handle. And, and the surface that you had on the paper that you ended up with was the surface that ended up on a shoe or a composite melamine laminate things. It was the surfacing paper, and this was important. But they had sophisticated equipment, and they had very high, good instrumentation for, I forget, spectrophotometers and things like that I didn't get into too much. But they had extensive research into inks and color, and because of the lithographic process, they did a lot of study for that, and it was a good homespun laboratory. But it was, now you got to realize that I got out of there in '92, so a lot happened since then. That was about when Sappi took over. I think the paper industry is, except for unique applications like this. Now, you bear in mind that what S.D. Warren is doing now, making Ultracast, if Sappi wanted to, they could move that to New Jersey if it was better for somebody, because they can buy the base paper somewhere and put a coating on it, and the embossers or the Ultracast coaters could be moved. So, that's not a high volume roll business like things were before. But I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of the equipment in the state has gotten antiquated in many of the mills. People knew how to handle paper, but I don't know, you really got to talk to somebody who's got his finger on the paper industry more than I do. I mean, I saw it as an adjunct or an upgrade of what you could do with paper. Well, I think most of the people that ended up at SD Warren, or a lot of, except in the Boston office, are the people that end up in the mill are local people in towns like Warren. Like Westbrook. Definitely had a French population that came with the paper mills, and and those are the guys that worked on the machines and whatnot. They become very good paper handlers and everything. But I think it's I guess the impetus for development and technology and whatnot, a lot of that might have come from outside, from people who have gone further in their education than the normal paper mill worker. I mean, he's goes to work in the paper machine when he's 16 or 18. Starts out and works his way up, and I think it's been business like that. The paper machine, the equipment, the machines that are used are as heavy as any industry other than the steel industry. I mean, those are mammoth machines, and so it does take expertise to run those things properly, and these guys have a lot of training, but I think cheaper labor in other parts of the world are making it difficult. Although we've got the paper, we've got the trees, and you wonder why how it could all disappear from here. Now, since the early days, paper used to have to be made out of spruce and pine and fir trees, what we call softwood, and it was a longer fiber, but it's coarser. And now they're using a lot more hardwood, such as maple, beech, birch, not so much elm because we haven't got them, and aspen trees, which actually makes blended with the longer fiber makes a smoother sheet, which has better properties for printing. Well, and there's a lot of training, there's a lot of expertise that has gone idle too. I mean, people in Millinocket or Lincoln, Maine, that are unless they can move, I mean, it's gone. And there's, I don't know how. Of course, the type of paper that you use in the computer industry and whatnot is not as highly sophisticated coding like it was for annual reports. And what you get for an annual report now, it comes with that flimsy paper because there's too much to read anyway. But it's cheaper and it's cheaper to ship thin, and they don't care about printing so much for a lot of it. We even had a little small casting machine in the lab, and that we could try different coatings, try different coatings on, and make samples and things. And we did a lot of research, of course, on or development work on different surfaces, and try to find out. S.D. Warren really, or at least we did, tried very hard to get to know what each individual customer preferred in terms of finish, in terms of the paper, in terms of design, leather grain, whatever it is that they're making. And it became a little hard when we started selling in China, because there it's one mill doesn't compete with another. They're all part of the same general mix, and you ship to someone, Bright Flower, so-called trading company, and he ships, and you don't really know where the paper ends up, and if there's a problem with it, you don't often know exactly what happened or who or why. Now, I did have one famous trip. It was 1987, where I went to visit a plant in Hagang, China, which is in the northern Manchuria, Heilongjiang. It would be in China, it's about the same place that Patton, Maine is in the United States. And it took me 5 days to get there and back from Beijing. And we had to go by taxi, by cross the rivers on a barge with your car, and they'd had a problem with our paper. We hadn't in those days. We still hadn't developed the proper packaging for withstanding the rigors of inland transportation in China. But the very fact that I'd gotten there and back resonated, I think, with the industry in China, and so it got us, the people approved the fact that you were paying attention to them, trying to figure out what they needed, and I'd spend a week or two or a week or 10 days in China at a time, and it was a little difficult. We did all our traveling practically by taxi, because you couldn't fly and stop off in a place and be able to go onward without having all your tickets beforehand, and it was difficult. So we'd get in a taxi at the Great Wall Hotel and do the whole Shandong Peninsula in 5 days. So it was that was fun. That was interesting. We keep saying, my agent over this said, eventually you're going to have to go to Bangladesh, because that's where it's going to end up. Well, I haven't been there yet, but and I don't think I'm going to make it. But we had a good following all over the world, and the export business was good.